So there's this game called Oxygen Not Included, which tasks you with supervising and controlling a colony of individuals who are known to do some extremely smart things. However, a certain question always came to mind when I was playing this game. What exactly would happen if you remove the group aspect of this game and simply play through the entire thing with one duplicant? And not just that, but what if you tune the rest of the game to be unfair alongside that? Now, I wanted to set a goal for all of this. While I could set out to do a full playthrough, that kind of takes a while and would be a bit hard to condense into a single video. So instead, I wanted to see if I could survive a full 100 cycles of in-game time, which is equal to about 100 days. Before we begin, I'd like to thank a supporter of mine, Azure Proxy. Thank you so much for deciding to be the first member of this channel, and even though I unfortunately didn't really get anything out during that debut month, it seriously managed to help push me in a direction where I'm hoping to more consistently make stuff going forwards. If you're interested in supporting what I do, you can become a member or donate through the options below the video. Alternatively, I still 100% appreciate subscriptions or likes, though I don't feel comfortable asking for it directly, so I'm just gonna say, hey, you know, that's a cool and sick thing, right? It sure would be epic and awesome if you pressed either of those buttons. With all that said and mentioned now, let us see how this new adventure goes. So first and foremost, we need to get some starting settings out of the way. Let's just go with, a radioactive ocean asteroid. I feel like these settings could also use an adjustment. There we go, that looks good. And just with a bit more re-rolling, we get, yes, crash satellites. The more radiation, the better. So with all that sorted, we start up the generation and get into the character creation screen, which seems a bit, empty. With our heroic colonist set, at least to the extent that an anemic, bottomless-stomached, mouth-breathing, pacifist narcoleptic can, who also really likes medicine, we head on into the actual game. Okay, so where do I begin? This game is heavily focused on elements and a bunch of random scientific things, at least to an extent that makes it fun enough to play with and possible to implement in a game. Now, if there's something that's outworldly or confusing there, I'll likely try to explain it here. But in the case that I don't, I strongly suggest to ask something in the comments or, like, I don't know, tell me I'm a stupid idiot dummy. That should work. Anyway, the start of this new soul colony begins by quickly taking a view of the nearby surroundings and taking note of the one-time food crops. I then sort out sleeping arrangements, as duplicants, like most living things, need to sleep and preferably in comfort, and then I get plumbing in order for reasons I feel like I don't have to explain. With a water source soon claimed, we move on to doing more digging. Which, by the way, encompasses a lot in this game, and I likely won't be showing much of it because of that. Now, with that said, I also decide to give our cool duplicant survivor here some new apparel to help stand out in the community. Oh, wait. Since there's not too much to explain for the time being, besides the excavation of natural resources in the surrounding area, I want to go over what exactly makes this harder than the normal game. First off, during the world creation, all settings were set to the max, which means a lot of things. Our singular friend here has to eat twice as much, oxygen masks and suits break much faster, radiation is a lot more dangerous, diseases are way more threatening, morale is noticeably lower, there's constant meteor showers, and finally, stress is much harder to manage. Oh, also, there's no care packages, so I can't receive stuff through the printer portal at the start here, and there's no teleporters, so I can't use the resources of another world I could normally travel to at the start here. But we're still not done here, because the duplicant details here are also different. So normally you have 3 duplicants, but instead there's only a single one here. And that single duplicant would normally have at least some positive traits to balance out the negative ones, as well as having interests to help out. That's unfortunately not the case here, as we have a much more different set of things as was seen beforehand, with the one here having a whopping 5 negative traits and an interest that can barely be used. Okay, I think that's good now on the explaining side of things. Let's continue with the actual trial at hand. So now that we're already a few days in and got some of the starting things set up, we also add in something to sort out the food issue, as we are already running out of food way too fast. We then set up a research station to prepare for some important future endeavors relating to, well, research. And with that, it seems that the basics are cleared. Well, kind of at least. An unfortunate issue is also the oxygen supply, which isn't too bad right now thanks to the bluish oxalate deposits that leak oxygen outwards, but they won't last forever. This is why the research is needed, as it will help create some farming tools to help domesticate the oxygen-producing oxyferns around here. Alright, now that the foundations are explained and set, let's fast forward a bit and see how things are going down the line. 7 days in and we're already out of starting food. Does this duplicant here have like a black hole in their stomach or something? Like, how did they? Thankfully, it isn't going to end here, as we can produce some low quality food using the microbe musher that was built earlier. Though, it seems something didn't go down well because this colonist here is looking a bit green around the gills. Alright, I think that was telling enough, so we're going to have to go after the nearby hexalin plants, which do give a good amount of food. However, this is only a one-time thing, so clearly I need to get this food thing sorted very soon. We also finish up the power station with the not hamster wheel and clearly safe batteries, and like the genius I am, I set it right next to the food station, as the one thing you want to mix is electricity and sustenance. Now, back on the topic of food, we also have stuff like mealwood growing around the map. This does give an infinite amount of food over time, but only in small yields, and the amount of time that does have to pass is somewhat long. At least it is now, but when plants are domesticated, they grow faster, which is super important for stuff like oxyfern, which instead produce much more oxygen. Anyway, we'll get to that stuff later when we get the farming stuff researched. Speaking of which, with the newly acquired farm tiles, we can set them up to start utilizing the oxyfern at a much more effective level. But there's something else here that's becoming an issue. In the top left corner, there's this little brain icon right next to a percentage, and it's been growing during all of this. This is stress, and when it reaches sufficient levels, stuff starts to change. Starting at 60%, movement alters and, well, honestly, it is kind of funny. But that's not the point. With it being more wild, stuff like jumping is noticeably slower, which increases the amount of time needed between commutes. And at 100%, something even more wild happens. Despite being a pacifist, our duplicant here has a burning rage lying within. So when that number hits 100, things start to get a little more violent. Anyway, with the entire power source destroyed, we have to go repair it, as without power, stuff kind of doesn't work. Though it appears that the tantrum from earlier wasn't just coming from the survivor here, as even the generators themselves have had enough of my mismanagement. And the batteries, okay, what is going on here? Hello? Are you okay, Power? So we get the oxyferns planted and set up, while mostly ignoring the fact that I now have no power source. I mean, that does get sorted eventually, but this is showing a rather large problem with using wheels for power, as the duplicant has to be there to help power everything else. And if the duplicant is working on power, then they can't be working on farming or research or just trying to live like a normal colonist. This basically means that every day my duplicant gets what seems to be nothing done, all because they have to do a ton of the same thing in order to assure that previously set up things work. And while I could replace the power source with something more automated, that requires me to research something new. And in order to research something new, the duplicant needs to power something. But in order to power something, they need necessities like food and oxygen, which means they have to be supplying those farming areas and gathering food, but if they're doing that, then that means they can't be powering the rest of the area, and if they aren't powering the rest of the area, then that means... Okay, basically what I'm trying to say is that everything requires manual interaction so far, and only having a single body to do that makes it really time-consuming. And time here is extremely important, given that we only have a limited amount of food so far. And this would probably be a lot more simple to do if my duplicant here could stop breaking my power source. Stop breaking that. I decided to set up a massage clinic, as it's one of the few ways to remove stress at this difficulty level. Or at least try to get it set up, but food is becoming more and more of an issue, and it's hard to allocate time to finishing the room needed for it. Thankfully, we do manage to finish it just as the stress was reaching a critical level. But it then runs out of power, like immediately, so like, what was the point? Also, this starvation thing is getting really, really bad. We are all out of one-time foods, and all the regrowing stuff isn't growing fast enough to feed the singularity stomach of the Duplicant here. And unfortunately, this does lead to an extremely awkward situation where, despite starving to death, our Duplicant finds it to be much more important to instead destroy the power supply, as it's clearly a more important task. Well, you know what? That was the last time you destroyed that power stuff, because guess what, Null? You're dead. Wait, that would mean I'm dead. Hold on. Okay, so clearly my approach wasn't the best this time around, but I think I got a general idea of what to change to make this work better. The main issue with the last attempt was bad priorities. And food, but mostly the priorities. So if I were to change some stuff around, we could get this to work. Probably. Alright, so let's start this back up again. Same world, but with some altered traits in other worlds. Same difficulty, and same character. I do the same of scouting out the one-time foods, but instead this time make sure to rush as many as possible so I don't have to harvest them later down the line. After creating my starting necessities, I get to researching some farming stuff again. But this time, instead of waiting for a further technology to be researched, I use the planter box, which normally I wouldn't use as the farming tiles are generally better. It's important to use the planter boxes here though, as I absolutely need to get the oxyferns set up as soon as possible to get the oxygen supply sorted. I also start producing some additional food using some of the harvested wild mealwood in hopes this will help with the food supply. I then begin research on the next project to get the farming tiles, and that stuff finishes rather quickly, which I guess begs the question why I didn't just wait a few more days to get this before I planted the oxyferns, but you know what, whatever. Next up is the power regulation research, which will give access to better batteries for power supplies. It's a bit after I begin that where I also start to build a massage clinic, which is kind of important because I got the full wrath of our Duplicant here during the last run and I don't want a repeat of that. Anyway, a bit further in, I get this fun moment where the Duplicant here wakes up and then falls back asleep on the ground due to the insane narcolepsy they have. Regardless of that, I also begin work on the mealwood segment of the farm area. Honestly, this is going really well so far, and I'm pretty confident this will be a lot easier than the original run. I mean, we have food, oxygen, and the stress is, okay, I guess, but it's still good enough, right? Speaking of food and all that, I also open up an area with some water wheat in it, as the lettuce from them is extremely good calorie-wise, even if it takes a while to grow. It's also here we get this amazing view of how slow the Duplicant moves with the eye irritation debuff received from the hydrogen gas in the area, and that is something. Sometime down the line, I also discover a Biobot builder, which would be super cool to make use of because having a second hand to do stuff would help efficiency massively, but that's kind of something to use only much further down the line, unfortunately. After a decent amount of time of just sorting out basic stuff, I decide to continue doing research and this time focus on getting advanced research as it will be needed to grab further down stuff. With that finished up, I then set up the absolute monstrosity of a computer and begin work on the agriculture tech for refrigerators and park signs, both of which are extremely important, but I'll get to that later. I don't think I have to state this because it really doesn't add much overall, but I really, really want to stop unclogging this toilet. Please help. Okay, so after a bit, we get the new research done with, and with that, I set up a refrigerator and a park sign within a nearby room. The refrigerator is likely self-explanatory, as when food isn't stored, it will rot. And given how much food I need, being able to have a backup amount that lasts a while will greatly help. But the park sign, while it doesn't do basically anything to help from a physical standpoint, instead allows me to mark certain rooms as nature reserves, of which grant a morale bonus to anyone that enters the area. And since the refrigerator is in the reserve, I can basically guarantee that our Duplicant here enters it at least once a day. Now, will this help on the stress fronts? I don't know, probably, maybe, hopefully. I also set up an electric grill to do more advanced cooking stuff over here, which would be neat as it uses less power, but I don't actually really make much use out of it. Yeah, so the issue of time being needed to be spent in one area over another kind of makes it hard to cook in the first place, so for the time being, I'm just gonna rely on raw meal lice and lettuce and all that stuff. And given the duplicant in question here and how lazy they seem to be on a character level, I think this makes more sense overall, to be honest. Well, in any case, I decide to expand upon the farm area just a bit as the entire hunger thing is becoming somewhat of a clear issue as time goes on. Now, the good news is that, unlike the oxyferns, mealwood does not make use of water and only use dirt. And because the tiles that were dug out nearby the farms were dirt in the first place, there's a widely available source of fertilization. At least, for now. Is there going to come a time where I run out of water and dirt for stuff, especially the oxyferns, so I won't be able to breathe anymore? After nearly avoiding starvation by having to breach the protective walls near my oxyferns, we managed to grab more food, which I had missed from earlier. This does create a tiny little, probably non-issue where I let some polluted oxygen in, but honestly, smog does wonders for the lungs. That's, unfortunately not true because it does cause some unwanted side effects like coughing and breathing more oxygen in, which is something I do not want right now, but just ignore that part, okay? Anyway, I get working on the next research project, with that being plumbing, as I'm getting really tired of having Null, or me, or whoever it is, I don't know, constantly run from place to place delivering water. So we're around halfway through the challenge, and I'm still over here having to grab the random deposits of food around the map, totally not worrying about the fact that I'm rapidly running out of food and clearly I'm not producing enough for myself. Help. With the plumbing tech ready to use, I start plans regarding a pipe system to help work with some new hydroponic farming tiles. Now, this would have been a smart idea, especially for food production, as it would help automate much of the process, but I somehow missed the fact that none of the food I produce actually requires water, so I abandoned that idea for the time being. You know, the more I play through this, the more I realize I keep making these weird plans to do stuff and just end up abandoning them like a few seconds later, and instead just keep doing the same thing. Also, something else I wanted to mention, even if it's pretty minor, is the fact that you can manually move duplicants that fall asleep due to narcolepsy, which, well, it kind of nullifies the entire problem of it, though it doesn't change the fact that it's still annoying having it happen at the most random of times. So at this point, there isn't too much else to mention, bar some farm expansions and such, as we're basically in the groove of things at this point. Or at least kind of, as stress is still a bit of an issue, but we'll address that when it needs to be addressed. I do start working on the next research of filtration, but swap that out for smart storage later, as I really badly want the auto sweepers from the tech. Though I did say that I wasn't doing anything that much important just a bit ago, I do actually decide to finally change my oxyfern farm area away from the older farm tech and replace the stuff with tiles. Sure, it wasn't exactly needed, but the efficiency of the oxyferns while they are off the ground isn't really the best, as the carbon dioxide that is needed for them often floats below the planter boxes, which causes them to basically just sit there doing nothing. I'm actually getting pretty confident about our chances now. I mean, the food has gotten so high that we have such a massive excess, and while it's true that the refrigerator is often not on because we keep losing power, everything besides that is also going swell, and it's not like something could go wrong in the last few cycles or something, right? Alright, I'm getting bored. It's been like over 10 cycles and I've done the exact same routine. I want to do something different. First off, I need more water, so I'm just gonna make use of this new deposit over here. But oh wait, that water area is too far away of a walk from the base. How am I going to get it quickly? Well, how about I just build a ladder going through the polluted zone in between my base and the destination? Oh, wait. Okay, so I didn't really think about this while building the new route, but by opening it up right next to my oxyferns, I just let out all of the carbon dioxide that was being used for the oxyferns and replaced it with a new batch of polluted oxygen. So that's probably going to be an issue for later, but, you know, doesn't matter. I'll figure out a solution when it actually becomes a problem. In other news, the also important duplicant here decides enough is enough again and breaks the power source because their desire to wreak havoc on energy infrastructure is never satiated. And they also break the grill? No, not the grill! Well, even if the entire base is in shambles because of the huge mistake I did, it doesn't matter. It's day 99 and I'm so close to the end. I do have to say, going into this, I didn't expect for it to go this rough, as when I tested it before, I only went for a few cycles in, and it seemed fine enough. But apparently, once you get further in, everything goes downhill. Yeah, sure, I'm not the best at this game, so it's clear I did things a lot worse than I could have, but hey, I did make it, right? So, at the end of this cycle, it passes from 99 to 100 with a bang, and it's clear we've beaten this challenge. Wait, there's a new DLC that's been released for this game with new stuff? Oh. So now what?